Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hitched Apologists. Today we have a special guest for you all. We're joined by the legendary Dr. Stephen Collins, Director of Archaeology at Veritas International University. We will be diving into some archaeological questions for you all today, and there is no one else better to do that with than Dr. Collins. Before we get started, Dr. Collins, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me on the program. This is great. It's good to see you guys again. Saw you guys a few weeks ago, but yeah, I've been doing this for a long time since college. I got really involved in anthropology in college, and then eventually I wound up over in the Holy Land back in the '80s, doing archaeology. I did a lot of background biblical studies, biblical languages, taught all of that for a long time, but my focus was really on the physical, historical evidences for the Bible, the historical background, and got involved in archaeology, dug at many sites, places like Bethsaida and Ai, and then eventually wound up directing the excavation at Sodom in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, about 14 kilometers northeast of the Dead Sea, and that was fantastic. We're still in the midst of that project, and been that's been going on for about 20 years now. And so that takes up a lot of my time, but I'm still teaching. I direct the VIU School of Archaeology. We have a stable of between Trinity Southwest University and VIU School of Archaeology. We have about 100 master's and doctoral students in archaeology. So it's very exciting to be training up the next generation of biblical archaeologists.
That's great. That's wonderful to hear. So, the first time that I actually heard about you was when I heard about this site at Tel el-Hammam. Is that the way to pronounce it?
Yes, Tal el-Hammam.
Okay. And so you have said that you discovered Sodom there. And how did you come to the conclusion that this was a site for historical Sodom?
Well, there's quite a backstory to this, and I would
Mm,
refer people to the book titled Discovering the City of Sodom.
mhm.
And that was published several years ago by Simon and Schuster. We always say it's published by the enemy. So, but that was good.
Mhm.
And but in that book, we track the whole history of this, which started back in about 1996. So quite a long time ago. I'm not even going to ask you where you guys were in 1996.
I think it was in
And
Utah.
yeah.
I think I was
So
6 years old.
but it seemed like everybody was putting Sodom toward the south into the Dead Sea. And that year I was leading a tour of we did lead a lot of tours to the Holy Land. So I was leading a tour, and I had Sodom and Gomorrah on my itinerary to take the folks there, and we were going to go there the next day. So I wanted to brush up on the story, so I got my Bible out and I started reading the Sodom tales, starting in Genesis chapter 13 and on through chapter 19. And when I got finished with it, I thought, now, wait a minute. I didn't see anything in there that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea, which is where most scholars and most archaeologists had put the traditional site for Sodom and Gomorrah. And so I thought, well, maybe I was sleep reading. You ever done that?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
sleepy and you find out that, well, how many pages did I turn?
Yeah.
And did I really read it? So I thought, okay, I'm going to read this really carefully. So I sat up in bed and I read it four more times. And when I got to the end of that last reading, I said to myself, I don't see anything in here geographically that would locate Sodom toward the south end of the Dead Sea. And I knew that geography really, really well.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been all over the Holy Land for a long time. I knew every piece of it, and the text was not matching up to what people were saying. In fact, I thought that night everything in this text locates Sodom north and east of the Dead Sea.
Mm.
By the way, I came to find out some years later, after I had already done my own research on this subject, that the 19th century explorer scholars, almost every one of them, put Sodom toward the north and east of the Dead Sea.
Oh.
And here's why. They did the same thing I did. What I did was take the map. There's a biblical map specifically written by the writer of Genesis to take you to place of Sodom. And that's Genesis chapter 13. If you look at all of that geographical data embedded in that text, it will absolutely take you to Sodom. And on the basis of that text, we drew a hypothetical map based on that geography. And of course, the next step was we got to get on an airplane. We got to take my wife and I and a couple of our friends. We've got to go to Jordan and get on the ground, and we've got to go see what's actually on this piece of real estate. And so we got there. We began to look for survey reports, any excavation reports that have been done at the Acor Library in Amman. And after several hours of that, we had a fistful of sites and Xerox copies of stuff that we could that could guide us. And we took our rental car and we the next day and headed to the valley and went site by site by site by site. But one of those sites really caught my attention. While we were there in that library, we ran into a little book by Rami Khouri, who is a pretty well-known journalist in that region. It was a book that he had written on the archaeological sites of the Jordan Valley. That was the title of it. And in there, so I'm perusing through and I'm looking in the area where we see that the Bible places Sodom. And he says this, he mentions Tal el-Hammam. He has a whole entry on Tal el-Hammam. And here's what he says. He said, Tal el-Hammam is the largest archaeological ruin in the entire Jordan Valley. And that raised my eyebrows. And when I saw it for the first time, I was really taken aback by that. It was so big. And so I purposefully saved that site for last. So we went driving site to site, picking up sherds of pottery, because that's how we analyze more or less the occupational history of a site. And I saved that one for last. When we drove up on Tal el-Hammam for the first time, I really couldn't believe my eyes. We kind of stopped on the hill coming down to it, stopped on the side of the road, and you could see it. And this massive city, which, by the way, I thought was the whole thing at the time, but it turns out it was just the upper city. The lower city is a lower mound around it. So there's a complete upper city and a lower city, as we now know, separately fortified. And so it was fantastic, and it was huge. And I'd never seen anything that big. It just sprawled. In fact, we now know it is the largest continuously occupied Bronze Age city in the entire southern Levant, which would include all of Israel and Jordan. So it was a big deal. In fact, we now know it is the most important Bronze Age city in the Middle Bronze Age. I mean, it's talked about in the Egyptian records. It's all over the place, and people were just looking. You know, isn't it interesting how archaeologists and scholars for a long time looked in the wrong place? They were just in the wrong place. I think I've heard that in a movie somewhere. They're looking in the wrong place. You know? Remember that? So anyway, it turned out to be there. But so people always ask me that when I speak at churches, or even when I'm at professional archaeology meetings. My colleagues ask me, "Well, how did this Tal el-Hammam is such a fabulous site? How did you find that site in the first place?" And I said, I followed the biblical geography and followed the biblical directions to Sodom, and voila, there it is. And so 20 years of archaeological project and excavation later, here we are. I think we've confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt, and there really isn't any other option. I mean, if the Bible says the Sodom was the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea, then I suppose you might want to look for the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea, and that ought to be a dead ringer. And so I think we've got it. I mean, it has palaces, it has temples, it has the biggest fortification system that anybody's ever seen, elaborate fortification around a Bronze Age city. I mean, these walls are 10 to 15 feet thick and three times as high, with gates and massive gates with towers, and it's very, very impressive sight. But the most exciting thing of all is that when you get into the ground and you find exactly what the Bible says ought to be there, then you just smile, and you say to yourself, I'm very glad about that, because the world is full of critics
Oh,
that say that the Bible is not historical
yeah.
or has historical flaws and problems.
Mm.
And every time someone says that, and of course, scholars had said for a long time, Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain were mythical. They're not real places. They're just, it's just a made-up story. It's some kind of a moralistic tale, and cities aren't real. But what I found out in my studies, and this is true, I mean, we don't just study the Bible, we study all the literature of the ancient world in that region. And ancient people didn't make up fake geography. There's no fictitious, there's no 5 Acre Wood or Middle Earth, anything like that in antiquity. And so we tell all of our liberal colleagues that no matter, and because they know this is true, no matter whether the storylines or the characters in the stories are fact or fiction, the stories are layered over a real world geography
Yeah.
that the authors knew well. And so, of course, if the geography is right, and by the way, in the last seasons, the last 10 years or so, we began to find lots and lots of proxies, indicators of a gigantic meteoritic airburst explosion that destroyed the site in the time of Abraham. And which is not so coincidentally exactly what the Bible describes in Genesis 19, when it says that God sent burning stone, koprit. Sometimes it's translated sulfur, but it really means burning stone and fire from Yahweh out of the heavens.
Oh.
It's really exciting to know that science, the archaeology and the science, the astrophysicists, 21 international scientists that worked on that and published on it and are still working on it, have confirmed that an airburst, exactly as the Bible describes in Genesis 19, actually destroyed the site.
Wow.
So if the geography is real, which we've confirmed, if the cities really exist, and if they're destroyed in exactly the way that the Bible describes in Genesis 19, then it's very hard to dismiss the rest of the story. How do you dismiss the characters? Was
Right.
Abraham a mythical character? Were the storylines mythical? Well, not in this case. I mean, archaeology tells us in this case, everything the Bible describes actually happened. Scientific fact.
Yeah. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt him. Speaking of critics, you made a good point there. So there are those who will acknowledge the archaeological evidence for places in the Bible, but then they'll go on to say that the actual events didn't take place because of their anti-supernatural presupposition. So as a Christian archaeologist, how do you tackle those views?
Well, what you just described is an interesting thing that people do. People who are critical of the Bible somehow have put the mantle on themselves
Mm.
of infinite knowledge,
Yeah.
right? They only say what they say. They can only say what they say if they really believe that they knew everything in the universe, right?
Yep.
How can you say that a story, a detailed story in an ancient record didn't happen the way it says it happened?
Yeah.
How do you know that? Whether God exists or God doesn't exist. I mean, ancient Near Eastern stories are all over the place.
Yeah.
We find them in Egypt, we find them in Mesopotamia, we find them in Anatolia. They're all over the Near East. And they talk about places, they talk about people, they talk about events. And most scholars, if they're in their right mind, accept the general run of those things as historical. Just because Tutmosis, for example, let me give you an example. Just because Tutmosis III hangs out with his god Amun-Ra and considers himself the incarnation of Amun-Ra and has conversations with his God and talks about all kinds of miraculous things that he was able to do in the Battle of Megiddo against the Canaanite kings that allied against him. He was doing these great feats of strength and all of this. But scholars don't throw that out just because Tutmosis III had a theological idea, had a theological agenda. The story propagates a theological agenda, but historians don't throw out the history because everybody in antiquity had a theological background and agenda. Everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't Plato, Aristotle, I mean, everybody who did anything in antiquity, all, Suetonius and all the Roman historians, everybody had a theological background. They believed in a god or gods, and they talked about them all the time. They wrote the classical histories, of course, the Greek and Roman gods, and but yet we don't throw out Greek and Roman history just because they had a theological agenda.
Yeah.
And so to say that just because Abraham talks with God or Moses talks with God or the biblical characters talk with God, that the history described around their characters is fictitious somehow or mythical is to logically cast off every bit of ancient material. We may as well forget about understanding ancient history.
Yeah.
You can't know anything about ancient history because everybody talks about their gods. In fact, today we kind of, mentally we kind of separate religion, kind of categorize things. We compartmentalize. We have our life and our business, and we have our family, and then we have our religion. Everybody kind of puts that over here. Well, that didn't happen in antiquity. In antiquity, it's very, very much the way Native Americans deal with they don't even like the word religion. In fact, I've been stopped by several Native Americans at lectures, and they come up to me and say, we don't use the word religion. We say way of life. It permeates us. It's the way of life. And that's the way it was in antiquity. Everything about life in antiquity is permeated by the gods. Or in the case of monotheists, like those in the Bible, of God. So it's really historiographically stupid to dismiss the historicity of the Bible just because God is involved. Because if you look at all of the writings of ancient Near Eastern history, particularly from the Bronze and the Iron Age, gods are always involved.
Yeah.
That's the way people think.
Yeah.
That's their life. That's their worldview. So I like to have fun with my colleagues in this way because they always say, well, the Bible doesn't line up with Near Eastern history, and I always make sure to ask them, which officially recognized Near Eastern history are you speaking of? And they will look at you like a deer in the headlights. And the reason they do is because there's no such thing.
Yeah.
There is no standard accepted ancient Near Eastern history to which the Bible could be compared. So let's face it, historiographically, the Bible is the best historiographical, geographical collection we have preserved from antiquity. Period. End of discussion. Everything else about the Near East that we know is constructed from the propagandistic writings of the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and the Anatolians primarily. And they don't write history for the purpose of informing later generations about what happened in the past. They write to aggrandize their kings. They want to make everybody look good, right? Kings don't care about their predecessor, and they don't care about their descendants. They care about themselves, and everything about themselves is going to be good. Everything on their records, but the Bible has a true historiographical character about it. In fact, many people don't realize that historians today write history the way they do because of the Bible. The Bible has always been the historical model for the writing of history because it's linear, it's cause and effect, and it has moral consequences. And that's the way good history is written. And we write it that way because the Bible is written that way. But no other kingdoms in the ancient world did that.
Yeah.
They just didn't. The Bible is unique in this regard. And so it's always fun to kind of get people to, well, I've heard the Bible didn't line up with ancient Near Eastern history. Ancient Near Eastern archaeology disproves the Bible. Well, where did you hear that? Give me a specific example. They can never do that. Right? Just can't. So there's a lot out there circulating around that's negative toward the Bible. The problem with that is it's not scientifically or historically valid. It's just people's opinions that have been spun because they want to keep God at arm's length. If you accept the historicity of the Bible, then somewhere along the line, you just might have to admit that God does exist. And if God does exist, then he's going to come poking his nose into your life.
Yep.
And he's going to have a claim on your life. And people don't want that. They want to be left alone. They want to do their own thing. And they don't want God telling them what to do and what not to do.
That's good.
So switching gears here from the critics, when it comes to, let's say, cults or other faiths and the findings that they have in their archaeological findings, how is it when it comes to Christianity versus those religions or cults? How does it compare?
I'm not going to say every cult likes their likes to dabble in archaeology, but a lot of them do. And in fact, there have been some pretty actually decent archaeological museums put together around the country by what we would consider cult groups. But for example, the Mormons, Book of Mormon. Now, I've spent a lot of my career looking at the Book of Mormon, researching the Book of Mormon, and having conversations with Mormons about the Book of Mormon, Mormon leaders. And so what I found about Mormons is that you look in the Book of Mormon, and it should be full of all kinds of archaeologically demonstrable things. I think the Book of Mormon has 16 cities mentioned, a whole bunch of different people, lots of civilizations, cities, towns, battles where millions of people were killed. It's got all kinds of stuff. It has horses and elephants and chariots and pigs and goats and sheep and all kinds of things. Well, archaeologically, we can investigate this. And it's very interesting to note that nothing mentioned in the Book of Mormon align. And by the way, the events in the Book of Mormon happened allegedly here in the New World. They happen in the North American continent, or sometimes they say North, Central, and South American continents. The problem with that is not a single city mentioned in the Book of Mormon has ever been identified. Not a single person or a single event or a single main animal or piece of technology mentioned in the Book of Mormon has ever been discovered on the Western continents. In fact, it talks about wheat and all kinds of things. All this stuff, nothing mentioned in the Book of Mormon exists in the archaeology of the New World. Now, and by the way, we also do archaeology in the Southwest, in the American Southwest. So I'm trained in that as well. And we do lead an excavation here. But everything in the Book of Mormon that should be identifiable in an archaeological record does not exist. It's not there. In fact, 100% of what's described culturally in the Book of Mormon is from the Bible. It's from the Old World. So they're just lifting what's in the Old World. Now, when Joseph Smith wrote this thing back in the mid-1800s, nobody knew anything about that. Archaeology did not exist. Near East studies did not exist. And so there was no way for anybody to check into any of this. Hieroglyphics hadn't been cracked, and cuneiform hadn't been cracked, and the decipherment of these ancient languages was still in the future. And so who could check? He spun all kinds of stories, and nobody could check it. But now we can check it. Anyway, so I have a lot of fun pointing out to my Mormon friends and colleagues even, and you do run into some of them in Near East archaeology, about the Book of Mormon. But you know what they always say? You get to the end of that discussion and you point out thing after thing after thing after thing that doesn't line up with reality. You have all of these things that just in the Book of Mormon that just don't fit reality.
Hmm.
And at the end of that discussion, they always say this: we don't care what archaeology says or science says or history says. If it disagrees with the Book of Mormon, it must be from the devil.
Mm.
See, you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a wall built around their book that does not allow it to be scientifically investigated.
Yeah.
But the Bible is complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
Hundreds of cities and towns and villages mentioned in the Bible have been identified. Kingdoms, empires, people. I mean, it's all there. And so the Bible, and a lot of people say, oh, the Book of Mormon and the Bible, they're religious books. They kind of belong on a shelf together. No, they don't.
Yeah.
The Book of Mormon belongs in the fiction section. The Bible belongs in the science and history section.
Yeah.
The Bible, the Book of Mormon is not a peer, P-E-E-R. It's not a peer of the Bible. It is not it's not on a par with the Bible. It's not on a level with the Bible. The Book of Mormon is out and out fiction. The Bible, scientifically and historically, is demonstrably factual.
That's good. Do you get a laugh when people say that Christianity is a blind faith?
Well, yeah, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a blind faith. In fact, in several places in the New Testament, and Paul is really good about this, he will talk about that the resurrection of Jesus from the dead in particular was his proof that God provided proof. And I think this was Peter, this statement, but Paul's all over it too, that God provided proof to all men of who Jesus was by raising him from the dead.
Yep.
The resurrection of Jesus remains one of the best attested demonstrably factual historical occurrences in the Greco-Roman era. And in fact, I would have to say that's why I have remained faithful to the gospel all these years, since high school, since I was a kid. Why? Because I got involved in apologetics and history and archaeology really early. And I've always been able to see through these sort of mental stunts that people try to pull on people to say that the Bible's full of errors, that the Bible has a lot of contradictions, or all of these things. No. The Bible and even, I mean, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead would be the craziest miracle of all.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how many people have pulled that one off in the history of the world? But yet he does. And what's interesting about that, to me, is that 100% of the evidence for Jesus' resurrection from the dead is physical. Every shred of evidence presented for Jesus' resurrection in the New Testament is physical. And John, in 1 John, starts his book off by using the Greco-Roman definition of direct evidence, by saying that what we have heard, what we have seen, what we have analyzed, and our hands have touched. And by the way, a Western law, constitutional law, British law, common law, and our legal system here has the same definition for direct evidence. Is the testimony of a witness who have seen, heard, touched the subject of interrogation. Boom, boom, boom. And that's where John goes. He doesn't say, oh, we saw him in our hearts. Oh, we had a vision. Oh, yeah. No. We heard him. We touched him. We hung out with him. We ate with him. It was all physical evidence. And so nothing about the resurrection of Jesus in terms of evidence was anything that couldn't be offered in a court of law.
Mm.
It's all physical evidence. So
Yeah.
anyway, I wrote a book about that. So
That's good.
it's called The Defendable Faith. You can get it on Amazon.
It's one of the ones we have on our shelf too.
Oh, good. Good. Great.
Now, what do you think Christians should keep in mind when it comes to good archaeology versus bad archaeology?
And there is both.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about good biblical archaeology or bad biblical archaeology. There's good, there's good and bad archaeology in all sectors
Yeah.
of the science. And part of that is that it's a soft science. It's not like physics or chemistry. It doesn't operate on universal laws or, the scientific laws of things like thermodynamics and electromagnetism. Archaeology is very much in the humanities sector,
Mm.
and being there, then it is often open to a lot of interpretation. And what tends to happen is that archaeologists will get excited about a particular theory idea that they have. And you can let a theory or an idea color your interpretation of data.
Mm.
And if you look at archaeology, you will see that the data can be sometimes, not all the time, but data can often be interpreted 2, 3, 4, 5 ways.
Mm.
And when it comes to data that bears on the Bible, if you're a non-believing archaeologist, if you're a secular archaeologist, if you're an atheist, and there are 3 interpretations that would support the Bible and 2 that wouldn't, which do you suppose they're going to talk about? They're going to pick the 2 that don't. They're always going to go opposite. Now, I will say that for those of us who deal with the biblical record, I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If there's 2 or 3 good, solid historical reasons for interpreting data in a particular way that supports the Bible, why not lean that direction and give the Bible the benefit of the doubt? By the way, in law, this is called that statements are fair on their face. A statement in the Bible is fair on its face until you can demonstrate substantively that it's not true.
Mm.
And so I just now sometimes there's evidence that's just so good, it's just so perfect, and I'm always nervous when things are so good that it's hard to believe. Maybe it's too good to be true. You have to have those little red flags that go up. You have to be critical. You can never take your mind out of gear when it comes to archaeological data. But you also have to be fair and balanced in your treatment of data and understand. And by the way, I have a little tool. It's been around for several hundred years. A fellow by the name of William of Ockham. Your people are probably familiar with him. He came up with this idea that the best theory of anything is the one that explains the most data and requires the least number of secondary and tertiary hypotheses to support it.
Mm.
So if you've got a theory that explains all the data, and if you have other theories that explain some of the data, but then they have to put together secondary hypotheses to explain why some of the data doesn't fit, then it's probably not a good theory. And so what I find over and over again is that when I use Occam's razor, what's the best interpretation that accounts for all the data and explains everything in a straightforward fashion? The closest distance between 2 points is a straight line. If we can go from here to there and we can connect those dots without having to go around the world to get there, that's the best one. And so I always look for the theory or the idea that accounts for the most data and requires the least amount of philosophical or, mental gymnastics in order to explain parts of it away or preserve parts of it. So, and it's very simple, like this. Jesus wrote, the eyewitness said Jesus rose from the dead.
Hmm.
Well, if he didn't rise from the dead, then you've got to spin some extra theories or ideas on why they thought he did.
Yeah.
Were they lying to us? They just really wanted to get themselves killed for preaching the resurrection. Um, you know, so there's all kinds of crazy things you could come up with as to why they taught or declared that Jesus was risen from the dead, that they had seen him, eaten with him, touched him, and experienced him firsthand. They kept bumping into the guy so frequently over a period of 40 days that they finally got it through their thick skulls that he was actually physically risen from the dead and he wasn't some kind of hallucination or apparition. That's the kind of thing that, to me, Occam's razor just says, whoop, that's clean. It's clean. The eyewitness reports tell us he rose from the dead. And if he didn't rise from the dead, then we have to go back and explain away every report.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I got in a conversation one time and they said that Jesus only rose spiritually, but I'm like, I don't see how Christianity could have really gotten off the ground if he didn't rise physically. So
Well, yeah, like everybody does that.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, everybody, I mean, the spiritual thing is pretty easy to accomplish, isn't it? Yeah, kill me, and in 3 days, I'm going to rise again. Okay. That's not what Jesus promised.
Yeah.
Jesus predicted a physical resurrection, and then the disciples reported a physical resurrection, and then Paul drags into it in 1 Corinthians 15, over 500 gentlemen who saw him all at one time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, there's no place hardly, there's no place behind closed doors in Jerusalem where you could stuff 500 people in ancient Jerusalem. This was a public appearance. We don't know where it happened, out in the open countryside or in the temple precincts or, out in a theater somewhere. Maybe they sold tickets. Hey, did you come to see Jesus? But it was a public appearance. And in fact, Paul says, if you want to check it out, some of these guys are dead, but most of them are still alive today, and they're all hanging out in Jerusalem. So, just go stand on the street corner and just yell, "Hey, did anybody see Jesus rise from the dead?" "Oh yeah, I was." Which, by the way, explains perfectly well why no Jewish detractors of Jesus spoke up against the resurrection of Jesus for the next 100 years. There were little theories running around, but there was no public discourse against from the Jews or anybody else regarding the resurrection of Jesus. And it's very simple. Why? The why, the answer to that is because any place you would have stood up to disparage the resurrection of Jesus, a fact in Jewish mind and Roman mind was determined on the basis of two or more witnesses. So if you stood up as a Jewish detractor of Jesus' resurrection on a street corner, there probably would be several people in the vicinity in the hearing of your voice that would be able to deny your claim and to attest to the resurrection, which would prove it. So they knew that there were so many resurrection witnesses that it would not be a good thing to try to stand up in public and do anything against it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and land this plane back and take it back full circle to the site at Sodom. And as of right now, how much of the site do you believe has been excavated there?
Oh man, not enough. I mean, a lot. I mean, if you look at our trenches, we have opened up vast areas, and as far as excavations go, we've done a lot. Plus, because of the fact that most of the site was never built over again after it was destroyed. For
Mm.
example, on the whole lower city, you can walk the Bronze Age city walls from the time of Abraham.
Mm.
And the destruction of the city is right on the surface. You just dig down, I mean,
Wow.
you just sweep it and there it is. So much of it was visible from the surface. But in the excavation itself, as we took from there and went back in time, the site is big.
Mm.
The squares that we excavate are 6 by 6 meters.
Mm.
So our whole site is divided into a huge grid of 6 by 6 meter squares. Numbers running north and south, lines running east and west are letters. And so the grid has, and I'm just talking about the fortified footprint of the
Mhm.
city. It could go to as much as 250 to 300 acres outside the fortification
Wow.
because it goes wadi to wadi.
Mm.
But just the fortification footprint, in that we have about 13,000 squares, 13,000 6 by 6 meter squares.
Hmm.
So in 16 excavation seasons, we were able to excavate somewhere around 150 of them. Now,
Mm.
that's barely a fraction of 1%,
Oh, wow.
but we hit we don't excavate in one place. We excavated in every sector. We
Mm.
lined it out in sectors. And so we excavated in the temple sector, we excavated the palace, we excavated, we know all the fortification system, the gateway, the big gateway. Remember, it says lots out in the gateway of
Mm.
Sodom. That was
Yeah.
very exciting when we found that. 7 years it took us to find that gate.
Wow.
And what was interesting is we found out when we first discovered the gate on that day, we realized that we'd been eating our lunch on top of that location for the first 7 years. So we were moving, in that direction. But anyway, it turned up to be right under our feet. But we know a lot. We know a huge amount about the city. In fact, we just Dr. Lane Rittmeyer, brilliant archaeological architect who has done most of the excavations, drawings for almost every excavation in Israel. He's just done over 150 new drawings, top drawings, reconstruction drawings of the site. So we know what the city looks like.
Mm.
And so it was probably, it's the most extensive Bronze Age excavation, probably, I'm not going to say in Israel and Jordan, certainly in Jordan, but there might be some that are as extensive as far as just the excavation, but not many.
Mm.
We had long seasons, 6, 7 weeks. Because of COVID, our last season was a double one. We doubled up because we lost two seasons to COVID. So that last season was 10 weeks. That was a long haul.
Mm.
But we uncovered a lot of stuff. And so we're still analyzing. It'll take us 8 to 10 years to finish up the final scientific
Wow.
publication. But Sodom has been found. It exists, and it's getting a lot of great press, getting a lot of play.
Mm.
We've done bunches of documentaries, 5
Mm.
documentaries with National Geographic alone. So just about every Science Channel, Discovery Channel on TV has done a documentary on it. So it gets a lot of play. People still don't like to talk about it sometimes. But yeah, we were even on with Bill Shatner, his Unexplained program
Yeah.
and all of that. And we just flew out to California recently to do some more taping out there on another show that's going to be coming out soon. So to me, it's exciting because I love getting the word about the historicity of Scripture out,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
especially those stories in the book of Genesis, which are, Genesis is the most critiqued and doubted book in the Bible.
Yeah.
If you can take a story like Abraham and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and you can show that to be historical reality, wow. What does that say about the rest of the Bible?
Right.
Exactly.
And for our listeners, how could they get involved in doing some of this stuff with you and going out to these sites?
Wow. Of course, we're our excavation proper field work is suspended right now because
Mm,
we had to draw a line in the sand. I mean, you just can't keep piling the data up. You have to
right.
stop. I'm not getting any younger. It's going to take me 10 years
Hmm.
to process through all of this with our staff, and the writing is complicated, the analysis is
Okay.
Yeah.
complicated. We have all kinds of testing to do, and so, because you have to write it up. If you don't
Mhm.
succeed in finishing the scientific reports, you may as well not have dug at all
Right.
because you got to have it available.
Hmm.
So that's the important part right now. So, um, but we do have supporters. If people would like to financially support what we
Hmm.
do, they can check us out. Um, but if you'd like to get our newsletter, we have a newsletter that goes out. I won't say once a week or once a month. It goes out when we get good and ready to put it out. At least once a month, sometimes once a week, and sometimes even more than that. It all depends on what's happening. We try to keep you up with all the things that are happening with the project and the analysis and what's going on and where we're speaking because we're around the country talking
Hmm.
about it. And anyway, it's very simple. You text dig Sodom, just one word, DIGSODOM, dig Sodom to the number 22828. It's easy to remember, 22828. Text dig Sodom to that, follow the instructions. That'll put your email, enter your email address. That'll put you on our THEP update that comes out periodically and at least once a month, and gives you opportunities to know where we're at, where we're speaking around the country. Also, we invite people to come to our lab and to
Hmm.
actually work on pottery or do other kinds of things.
Nice.
And we got people, they say, "Oh man, I love to do puzzles. You got any pottery that needs to be put together?" Well, as a matter of fact, we do. So there's all kinds of ways to get involved.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, we went to that museum a few months ago and we did the pottery, and you're right, it reminds me of a puzzle, and I love puzzles, like
Yeah,
the 1,000 piece puzzle kind of person. So
yeah. You can get lost in it. Yeah, it really is fun. Just yeah, it's very relaxing to me to do that.
yeah,
But it also helps the process of analyzing.
yeah,
mhm.
And so it takes a lot of people to get this sort of thing done. It's not something that a handful of people can do. It
yeah.
takes 50 years if that were the case. So, we have students and volunteers and our staff and people that work on this stuff constantly. So, and it's fun to put your hands
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the real stuff from the world of Abraham. It's pretty exciting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Collins, we appreciate the time you took to have this discussion and answer our questions. And I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy this episode. And we just wish you all the luck in your endeavors and your papers and your research and getting this all out. And hopefully it won't take 8 years. Maybe it could be a little bit less because we're all ready to read that.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on. It's great to see you both again. We'll see you around the queue.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.